Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today with this next session. I'm joined today by somebody who must be the busiest man in health and safety and leadership, somebody I'm very proud to call a friend, Dr. Waddah. I'll ask Dr. Waddah to introduce himself in a moment. He knows himself far better than anybody else, so I always find it works much better if Dr. Waddah introduces himself and gives you a little bit of his own background. But a quick overview, we're joined by somebody who's a business leader, somebody who's a health, safety, environmental and sustainability professional, engineer, author, prolific author, I must say. And one of the books that Waddah has acted as editor-in-chief for is the subject that we're going to cover today. And it's this much overly used phrase as well in terms of thought leadership. Waddah actively gets involved in that in terms of what health and safety leadership actually means, and indeed what leadership actually means. So I'm really happy to hand you over to my colleague Waddah to take us through today's session on process safety management and human factors. Waddah, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. As always, with NEBOSH's relationship, I very much cherish. This presentation is, as Matt mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, is on process safety management and human factors. And it's based on what we call an experiential approach, and it's based on the book that was published about a year ago with Elsevier and the IChemE. One of the main reasons, one of the main motivations, created about 14 other contributors. I was honored to be the chief editor for the book and contribute to a few of the chapters and sort of stitch up the whole book together and edit it in the end. Was the fact that process safety managements have been around for several years now. Well, probably several decades, actually, to be more precise. The issue is we still have very serious process safety management incidents. And when we look at the data and we look at, why do these kind of incidents occur, we realize that, the human element and the human factors are very much at play. So what we decided to do is do some research, which then culminated in this book on process safety management and human factors. And we called it an experiential approach because it was more, less focused on the theory and more focused on the experience and knowledge from people who have been practitioners, consultants, academics, practitioners, regulators, and so on and so forth. So we were very happy to present this book. I'm representing also as chairman of the Platform for Connected Leadership. This is an organization here in the Middle East which is trying to develop more on the leadership side, leadership, governance, strategy, and trying to really focus on what do future leaders need. So this fits in quite well with that. So Matt has asked me to introduce myself. So I started in refining back in '98. In fact, before that, I worked as a consultant for about a year and a half with a engineering consultancy firm. So I've had the experience of being an EHS officer on site, then an EHS coordinator for the refinery, then an EHS advisor for the ENOC group, and then I became group EHS and Q manager in 2003, I guess, and then director in 2010, and then senior director in 2015 as executive director, then senior director of sustainability and operational excellence for 2 years from 2018. And now, actually, since I've become senior director for logistics and marine assurance. So I've had quite a wide experience, and I've completed about 24 plus years in ENOC, and then a year and a half before that. I have several qualifications, which are academic, vocational qualifications, and fellowships with international bodies. I am the honorary chair for the Energy Institute here in the Middle East, so that's quite an exciting role as well. And I work with boards a director on several boards, NGOs, industry forums, and I have been on private joint stock companies as well. So I play an advisory role as well. So I speak from sometimes the perspective of looking at senior leadership and how they look at these things which relate to safety. My interests are very research, technical governance, theology. I like clay pigeon shooting, and I love cooking as well, which is something which I think my kids have taken on. With being the youngest two UAE national twin chefs now qualified. Subject areas of my research include reflective learning, HSC, sustainability, corporate governance and leadership, business and operational excellence, and obviously process safety management, human factors. And really focused on HSC practitioner development. There's a few things that we do to help practitioners and mentor practitioners moving forward. And many passions, including education, training, development, theology. I won't go through all these, but these slides are available. You can look at this. There are several publications. There's actually one which is missing here. There's one on health and safety governance and leadership, which I've written with a dear colleague called Bob Arnold, and that looks at actually a standard, management standard, to help basically leadership apply the ISO 45001 standard. It's a standard which is based on creating that alignment between the board and the executive leadership teams in organizations. But as you can see, books here on safety management, reflective learning, operational excellence, and the 10 MBA for HSC Pratt is very much aware of. It's a book that was written by myself and a guy called Rob Cooling, and we try to create business acumen skills for HSC practitioners. And as I said, the governance and leadership. I've even done a book with my father on which is a theological book, and obviously the process safety management and human factors that we'll be talking about today. Okay, enough of that. So anyway, the presentation outline today will be giving you an introduction to PSM, defining the human factors, discussion in which elements of PSM do we see human factors playing a role in, and how, and taking you through the elements and links to the NEBOSH PSM certificate program, and we'll end with some closing thoughts. Okay, so this is quite a vast subject, extremely vast subject really, and human factors is not an easy thing to get our heads around. It's a big subject, and it's very much exciting because it's very much developing and unfolding. But at the end of the day, we would like to just give you a taste of what the publication looks at in terms of the areas, but looking at just various different elements and how human factors play a role. So if we look at the OSHA standard, the 92 process safety management of highly hazardous chemicals, it defined really 14 elements. Now, the different systems on process safety management exist around the world. So there's the OSHA standard, there's a standard that was developed by the CCPS, there's another standard that was developed by the Energy Institute, etc. But, let's take these, just as a broad broad guidance. These 14 elements, including process hazard analysis, which is basically looking at the risk assessment. You have the operating procedures. There's the PSI, process safety information, and the communication of hazards. Training and development. There's contractor management. There's mechanical integrity, hot work, management of change, audits and compliance participation review. So I'm going to broadly cover those areas in the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. So moving on, really, when we come to human factors, and it's an area where we're more probably familiar with process safety management because we've dealt with it, but I think as practitioners we are less maybe directly involved, or have less exposure to human factors and human factors definition. So we can really describe human factors as the design of systems, jobs, and organizations to match human capabilities. And in that, really, the objective is to clearly optimize human and system performance. So it is an optimization system as much as it is a loss prevention or an incident mitigation kind of, so understanding human factors, the primary purpose should be to understand how we can optimize human and system performance. So human factors is more focused on designing the system to meet the capabilities of humans, then try to really change the human to meet the demands of a poorly designed system. So as opposed to that, we want to design systems which meet the human capabilities and in an optimal way. The human factors approach is therefore distinct really from approaches such as behavioral-based safety and training, competence, and safety culture as such. So human factors really have, I believe, a fundamental role in process safety management. And significant advances in process safety management approaches, and tools such as HAZOPs and bow ties and stuff like that, and the use of technical safeguards. So appreciating that a good development in industry, therefore, is the major incidents and accidents are still happening. So why is that? So human beings are involved in both the prevention of those incidents and as much as they are in their causation. Yeah? And that is less well understood, we believe, than the technical safety aspects. So human factors, therefore, arguably represents the most important area of focus for future improvements in the broad topic and the implementation of process safety management. So when we try to really address human factors in process safety management, the human being is a flexible and adaptable component within the PSM system. And this is good because when processes are too difficult, complex, or costly, what we can do is we can use automation or engineered safeguards. But both technology and humans offer the greatest scope for both reliability and adaptability, and features which any process safety management should really possess. So whilst humans were traditionally seen as the weak link in process safety management chain, and the human focus of human factors activity was for many years on kind of eliminating or mitigating that risk of human error, and really looking at enhancing human reliability. So human beings will continue to be the essential component in the system. So something which enhances the effectiveness and the flexibility of the system and not just the source of failure. So we need to look at human factors not only as the source of failure. I'll try to emphasize that, and hopefully in the next few slides that will come clear. So take most advantage of the skills and capabilities which the human the human actually brings. It is important to make use of established and emerging human factors theory and practice, because this is something which has been around now for years, and we should make use of it. So this is a diagram taken from the UK's HSC publication on human elements. So if we have a human failure, and I just want to highlight something here. This is a very, very nice, simple diagram. If you have a human failure, that human failure could be because of as a result of an error, which is cognitive, or a violation, which is more motivation-based. If it's an error, it could be either skill-based, so it could be a slip of action or a lapse of memory, or it could be a mistake, because we didn't get the rules right. So it could be rule-based, or it could be knowledge-based, because we lack a bit of the knowledge. And otherwise, it could be a violation, which is more a motivation. So operators will, maybe routinely do violations because, it's too difficult to follow the procedure, or too challenging to use the equipment which has been given to them, or the design of the system is such that it makes it very difficult to do. So they do routine violations, or the fact that there is just such a broken safety culture that they just routinely violate all the procedures. It could be situational. It could be, due to a rise of a particular situation that, the operator has to, undertake something which is a violation to the procedure to overcome that problem. Sometimes, try to prevent something really bad happening. It could be exceptional as well. It could be something which is not something that usually happens, but exceptionally there was a violation that took place at a particular time. And it could be also malicious, where someone's actually trying to cause a problem to the process. So I'll just say one thing here, that in many of the incident investigation reports I've been involved in kind of reading or being involved in incident investigations, a lot of the conclusions of these incident investigations always come back and say, well, there's more training which is required. More training would need to be done. If someone is violating and the root cause of the violation is something difficult for a certain practice or to do a particular thing in the plant or in the operation, that's not a slip of action or a lapse of memory. It can be rule-based or knowledge-based. I mean, they know the rules. They have enough knowledge and competence. They're not really forgetting something. So their human failure would be due to a violation. Training them some more might not actually correct the action, so it will not actually get rid of the violation, and therefore it won't get rid of the human failure. And that is why we need to understand why, when violations take place or when errors take place, they will all lead to human failure. But at the same time, why they actually have taken place must be understood in order to know what is the best way to kind of deal and treat the issue. This model just tries to explain the sort of the complexity. So you have the system on one side with all the elements, and you have the planning, the monitoring that needs to be done, the review, which is these are the basic steps. And if you look at from the leadership side, the amount of stuff that needs to be really done in terms of understanding the leadership qualities, their competencies, their behavioral competencies, the understanding of the governance system, the risk management, and the control, and the policy development and implementation, all driving all of this to create that process safety management system to really keep it sort of in place. It'd be interesting to note that in the PSM certificate, if you look at section 1.2, for those who have gone through the certificate or are planning to go through the certificate, it really covers the role of senior executives and the board leadership within organizations, especially their role in providing resources and support to the system. It's also covered under establishing a system, point 1, as well in the qualification. But leadership really does drive everything, and these 7, I like these 7 areas which have been highlighted in the attributes and the influence of safety culture by Krause, which was taken from the IOGP 452, which is the standard on safety, the document on safety culture, and shaping safety culture through the organization safety leadership. So we have to be credible as leaders. We really have to be action orientated. Leaders really have to act to address unsafe conditions. Obviously, without a vision, you're not painting a picture that people can follow. Accountability is extremely important. Leaders ensure employees take accountability for safety critical activities. Communication is the way that leaders communicate about safety creates and maintains that safety culture within the organization. And then collaboration, really, it's very important. And I think we've seen this, the level of collaboration between people during the COVID pandemic for a couple of years, is that people's level of collaboration has decreased because, although we can communicate with each other online and we had, the opportunity to continue to stay connected, but we didn't connect maybe as well as human beings without being able to actually sit across from each other. But it's important because it promotes employee ownership of all kinds of issues when we try and deal with safety issues. And the feedback and recognition that is soon, certain, and positive encourages that kind of safe behavior. I have always been very skeptical of KPIs, and I'm skeptical because mainly a lot of KPIs are drawn out for organizations, and they're very linked not so much to the key value drivers of the organization and the strategic intent of the organization. They're more connected to, the outcome first. So we put these KPIs first, and then we say, okay, so how do these KPIs then add value to our organization? KPIs have to be really created based on the key result areas and the key. And these key result areas are usually linked to the kind of the imperatives, the strategic imperatives of the organization. But in saying this, understanding leading and lagging indicators and the differences between them, and understanding the leading indicators are considered predictive indicators, and therefore the target setting for leading indicators needs to be done very, very carefully. Because if you have an organization with good leading indicators and then suddenly you have a set of bad lagging indicators, then there's something wrong with the way that you're setting up your leading indicators, because they should be able to evaluate the weakness that can be corrected to reduce occurrences leading to the lagging indicators. So lagging indicators tend to be outcome orientated, describing events already occurred, but they also have value, as in they indicate events that may reoccur if the problem or the root causes are not addressed. So that's why you have a good incident investigation system. And they're both equally important, I think, because they give you a balance. And I think that leaders need to really understand how to use both of them. But remember that managers use this as a sort of a snapshot to understanding what is the values, what do these values actually mean in the KPIs and in terms of their criticality, and highly depend on target setting. So you set a simple target, you can achieve that target. So the target setting methodology and processes is what I saw where I see the weaknesses in kind of most organizations. I won't get into the slide too much, but as you can see, from concept, feed, detail, design, construction, pre-commissioning, and commissioning and startup design, really, the earlier you start incorporating HSE and human factors specialists in every stage, you find that better results and performance can be achieved. By the way, if you look at the NEBOSH PSM certificate, it covers this area under 2.2, which is the risk management techniques used within the process industries. So the HAZOPs, the hazards, the QRAs, all explained quite well in the qualification. As you can see from this diagram, that human and organizational issues are attribute 20% of all these kind of accidents and incidents. But this is really directly. Indirectly, I think that most incidents are caused by human error, and you'll find most of the studies talk about that. So many of the incidents will find a root cause in the human lack of performance or error. Asset integrity is a very, very fundamental element within the process safety management system. There's a fine balance really between these three areas of the design integrity, operational integrity, and asset mechanical integrity. A lot of people think that asset integrity is about maintenance. It's not about maintenance. It's about designing the thing right, designing the thing within the right operating envelope, within the right safety measures. And then it's about actually operating the plant or operating the equipment in the way that it was designed. And then the asset mechanical integrity, it is maintained and inspected in the correct kind of frequency and the right kind of action. But all of these three areas is held very much together by the HR kind of integrity, the human reliability integrity, or the leadership piece. And by the way, asset management and asset integrity is covered, including maintenance strategies under Section 2.3 of the certificate qualification. Management of change, I think one of the most important, most critical elements. Management of change really is one of the most fundamental elements. Most incidents occur during a changing phase, either during a startup, during shutdown, or during what we call abnormal. And the change is introduced into a running system designed to operate in a certain way, which sometimes is outside the operating envelope and now have to be redesigned or redefined to operate in another. If this process is not done properly and the procedures don't assure that, following the technical basis, the impact and understand the impact of change on safety and health, modifications and operating procedures, and how that changes and impacts on the operators, necessary time periods for that change, and the authorization requirements for the process change, can really, really end up with a disaster. And we know that there are many case studies of that. The certificate covers this under Section 1.4 in terms of the changes. So there is a management of change process. You can have a sequential process, and you can have a MOC taking a parallel process. In either way, when we go through the reviews, at some point, all of the people who are related to that change need to come together, and need to discuss that kind of change. And doing this process in parallel, in my personal view, is probably more effective. And I think that should be really considered. The implementation of safe systems of work, also assessing the task, identifying the hazard, defining the safe methods, implementing the system, and monitoring the system. In all these steps, really, we need to look at also the human interaction with all these kind of things. So when we're looking at the risk ranking or trying to eliminate or reduce risk, we don't only look at the mechanical systems which are in place, but we should look at also the human intervention. In the implementation, for example, avoiding shortcuts and the stop work authority would be very important. This is, by the way, covered under sections 3.1 and 3.2 in terms of operating procedures and safe startup and shutdowns, and it's quite an involved section of the certificate program. When we look at ineffective work, I mean, just to look at very, very simply, if the operator activity performance, if we look at, expecting the operator to operate without an overall work plan, what you'll end up having is confusion. If you don't give them the resources, they'll end up being very frustrated. If you don't give them clear work instructions and roles and responsibilities, you will get resistance. And if they don't have the right skills and the systems in place, it will raise anxiety. All of these, regardless of how good your process safety management system is in place, will cause greater human error. Process safety information. In fact, in the past, I never appreciated how important process safety information was until doing the research in this book, honestly, because if the information on the chemicals, for example, that you're dealing with is not available, if the manual entries or the chemical information lead to wrong communication of information, if the data entering person has no expertise and doesn't give things the right consideration, if users are not aware of the chemical hazards and availability of the information in PSI is not communicated, if the changing chemicals required concentrations are not updated, for example. So many things can go wrong, in not communicating the right information. So process safety information is really, really important because we rely on it, because we rely on human beings assuming that they're going to pick up the information from the right place to make the right decisions when they're doing their work. For process equipment, for example, the relevant human errors can be detailed information on the process equipment not available, or the maintenance record is not updated, and you're trying to rely on human memory, if the equipment inspection plan is missing, if the worker's training data is not updated, if the spec sheets for the process equipment is not available, and all of these areas. So much can go wrong, really, looking at equipment. The same thing with the technology components as well, if the drawings or the systems are not updated. So a lot of this is covered really in sections 3.6 and 3.7 under dangerous substances and reaction hazards as well. Pre-startup safety reviews are extremely important because they are a process for collaboration between engineering, contractors, the operations team to try to get a plant started up. Many levels of reviews, and there needs to be a lot of trust between the different teams. I think it's probably one of the most critical operations. Most incidents happen during startups and abnormal conditions or shutdowns. So the human factors and their interactions are so critical, really, to understand and appreciate the communications is very much key to this in the systems. And the system to ensure all needed startup and checks, tests have been done, and all the PSM has been communicated is very, very critical. So PSSR is a great system for communicating. This is covered under section 3.2 of the qualification. But, you know, when you consider human elements in projects, you should consider including human factors within a project during feasibility, looking at the factors, the human factors input for a project, and then establishing the human factors requirement support to evaluate the design, to enable the transition to operations and manage the human factors when you're doing the detailed design and the construction. And then in operations, we really need to ensure the user needs to meet the human factors risks are kind of managed, and to manage the human factors risks for disposal as well of the asset. Now, it's very important also to make sure that during the startup of a project that, you know, we have reached that optimized phase where the system is helping us support the operator in actually conducting. I've been on many sites in my experience where we've gone to the site and then, you know, the system has been designed and placed in a certain way, and then it's not been effective. And actually the design of the plant and the way it's been set out actually can cause you know, human injury or cause actually operators not to do certain things because it's just too difficult a task to do it on site, or, you know, the valve can't be reached because it's been placed too high without a platform, and so on and so forth. Many examples. When we're looking at assuring human element reviews in projects, there is a process which is called the Safety Critical Task Analysis, the SCTA, which in practice really involves three kind of stages. So like any kind of risk assessment process, safety critical task identification, and then doing a task analysis after that. And once you've done the task analysis, you can do a human reliability assessment. And this is very specific to the human factors and human elements. So SCTA TI is used to really rank order tasks in terms of their safety criticality, the potential to lead really to a major kind of accident. And remember, this is not leading to only an occupational. There are various methods of performing the SCTI, but the high priority safety critical tasks really individually analyzed in detail to determine how the tasks or should be kind of undertaken. So how do we do the HRA when we look at doing a HRA? This really involves following various steps, including the performance shaping factors that could actually make errors more likely. You know, how the error or the violation actually could occur. So it requires a bit of imagination, right? And the consequence of that error. So understanding the error or the violation happening. Remember, we spoke about the human performance. So how could that occur? And then understanding the consequence of that failure. And then also understanding how the failure could be recovered from, if at all, if it's possible to recover from that failure. And the risk controls which are then in place. So these are the kind of the mitigation measures, if you like. And once you've studied that and you think, well, no, actually it's not really safe enough because we don't have enough controls in place, then you might want to add additional risk controls as required. So let me also conclude with a couple of slides on this. So there's linkages clearly that exist between the PSM qualification and looking at human factors, although the qualification itself right now, the certificate, does not cover human factors as such, not explicitly anyway. The key elements do exist which are PSM related, and for those who are doing the training with trainers who share, kind of case studies, then definitely the human error can be explored in many of these incidents that happen leading to PSM disasters. And as a safety practitioner really wanting to work with process manufacturing, oil and gas, etc. industries, this qualification does provide in my view, a kind of sound foundation. You might need to do more to build on top of that foundation, but it is a very solid foundation. Aspects of human error are not fully covered, but your knowledge and experience with interactions with experienced persons should really help you identify those areas. I tried to, in this presentation, just to highlight a few of the areas. Actually, there is a program that we are developing at the moment for industry, which is a 3-day program that will cover just human factors to connect with PSM. It's for people who have already some PSM qualification or worked with PSM for a number of years. So it looks at really the human factors in those kind of areas. So it is a vast subject. So don't beat yourself if you haven't got your head around it, even after just doing this qualification. It requires quite a bit of work and reading in this area. Understand the elements of this presentation in obviously in context of that, and having some qualification in process safety management would help, including experience in working with PSM systems. And I'll leave you with a few thoughts. Understanding process safety elements is key to the future of this industry, definitely, because it's helped really reduce many of the major incidents. It hasn't eliminated them, and that's why we need that, and to understand PSM in the context of human factors. And as you can see, human factors really, impact on all the PSM elements, but in different ways as well. PSM and its elements have many branches and expertise in different elements, should be appreciated in industry at large, and there are generalists and specialists. The most important thing is for them to collaborate. There are many standards around the world, but we must be able to impact on our addressing of risks when using PSM systems in a very, very pragmatic way. In my view, I think understanding human factors helps us apply PSM in a very pragmatic way. The PSM and human factors specialists come from, in most cases, from very different paradigms of thinking. And education backgrounds and experiences and so forth. So that's another reason for them to work very collaboratively and try to understand, try to learn from each other, and try to see how they can work together to make safer systems overall. PSM cannot succeed to provide high reliable organizations without a good handle on human factors in industry. And I've done a lot of research on high reliability organizations, and when you look at the main aspects of human reliability organizations, there's a lot of stuff there which really drives human reliability thinking. And if you are interested, then definitely I would recommend that you look up this qualification. It's available on Amazon, available on Elsevier, available online. We had, as I said, took about 2 years to develop this publication. We've got 14 contributors from so many different walks of life, very practical book. We've had people from consulting, regulators, incident investigators, and specialist academics contribute to this book. We've had the book has about 20 chapters, shortish chapters, about 8 to 10 pages each with an epilogue. It was published by Elsevier, as I said, a couple of years ago. And I had the pleasure and honor to be the chief editor. It's very practical, and the focus is on knowledge bridging the challenges found in PSM and human factors, and and looking at that from a practitioner's approach. And yeah, that's the web link. Should you want to explore more about the book or get it online. So, and that's it, Matt. I'd like to thank NEBOSH again for inviting the Platform for Connected Leadership to come and speak to you today. And yeah, I'll be happy to take any questions, Matt, if you'd like to direct them. And,
yeah. Thanks, Waddah, and a quick apology to both Dr. Waddah and the colleagues who are listening in at the moment. There was a few little glitches there with the tech, and I think it's just the joys of doing these online conferences. But I don't think anything was lost at all in the messaging there. Really, really informative presentation as always, Waddah, and I mean that. I've got any number of Waddah's books, and I've just grabbed a couple off my bookshelf while Waddah was talking. And I can heartily recommend them. They're very accessible, but informative as well. I'm not just saying that because Waddah's here. I've recommended them to a few people. So if you are looking for a bit of CPD, looking for some support, direction, it's a complex issue, as is the world of business for a lot of practitioners, as is the human factors notions, as is health and safety leadership, and the publications that Waddah and his colleagues have worked on are very, very accessible and useful documents. So I'd encourage you to look at them and get hold of them. So I'm mindful of time, Waddah. One question which did occur to me actually as you was going through, and I'm being very selfish here, asking you one of my questions rather than some of the questions that we'll get from the people who are listening in, our colleagues who are listening in. When we developed the PSM qualification, and of course you were a key consultee in that as well. I remember the first time you and I met, and we started exploring what it is a process safety qualification needs in order to drive health and safety culture. One of the other, I spoke to many people across the UK and internationally in developing that qual, and one refinery that I visited, and I won't say which refinery it was, told me that they had engineered out every possible human error from their processes. And frankly, I couldn't get away from there quick enough, to be honest, with that sort of thinking. You go back to HRO, high reliability organization thinking, and this sense of sort of obviously deference to expertise, but also this preoccupation with failure. I wondered what your thoughts were with that kind of sort of thinking. And this was a very large refinery I was on. But yeah, we've dealt with all the human factors. Our people can't possibly do anything, that's going to cause error. It was weird. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think it's it's impossible to do that. I think it's impossible to remove the human being completely. I mean, even as you know, the highest of reliability organizations. I mean, two sectors. We have the nuclear sector and we have the aviation sector. And we still have incidents, and those incidents, when you look back at the end of the day, it's most of the problems that we've had with airline. I mean, even if we take, for example, the MAX 8, which was a design flaw. When you really do look at the investigation and understand, okay, so it was a design flaw. I mean, the pilots could simply have put the system from automatic to manual, and then been able to override the system and not allow those aircrafts to crash. However, if you look back, and there's a very nice series actually, not I'm promoting Netflix or anything like that, but there's a nice documentary called Downfall, and it really explains how many of these pilots were not trained, and because of the way that aviation sector operates, where training and drilling and making sure that people are highly competent. Now, aircraft today, a lot of what happens on aircraft is very automatic. The kind of systems are really sophisticated, and they've made that industry extremely highly reliable. We still get human errors, and there's no way that you would completely be able to eliminate human error. But an interesting question maybe to you and to the audience is that if that is the case, and we were able to completely engineer out all human factors. And because human beings, as I said at the beginning, human factors and understanding human factors and the human element is more about system performance optimization as opposed to only human error that leads to loss, right? So would you get on a plane, Matt, which didn't have any pilots?
Well, no, because
so an autonomous aircraft. Would you get a flight from London to Dubai?
I wouldn't know.
Why? I mean, it's the system, and they would have, whatever British Airways or Emirates would have told you that we completely engineered out the human being
exactly
from all of this just on the plane.
It's just the assurance that I require for that input, that expertise, that oversight, that, all those important factors. And actually, you and I both know, Waddah, that often the way a procedure, for example, is written and then the way it's done can differ and be reliant on experience and all those sort of unforeseen consequences that actually that human intervention solves that problem, Personally, I mean, I know other people would feel the other way, but for me, the thought of having nobody sat at the front of that plane would be quite alarming. But the fact is, of course, that I suppose when they're up there, most of the flying is being done automated and controlled in that way. But just having that intellect still sat at the front there to be able to go, okay, something goes wrong, I know what to do and how. For me, is an essential part of the process.
Yeah.
That would be my
remember the landing in the Hudson River.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, Sully and all that.
Yeah. I mean that pilot took a big risk, but took a big calculated risk, and it was very much based on his experience and knowledge that he would have been able to do that. But I think that he looked at all the options, and he knew that he wasn't going to make it back to the airport. So, and if that was the case, that they would have been doomed. So then he decided to go and land it. Obviously, he had some experience and, his background as a pilot and landing in those kind of conditions. So, but he did take a risk, because actually the aircraft that he was flying at the time was really not designed to float on water or land on water or take off on water for that matter. But he still did that. I mean, so human beings, so really there's a big opportunity. So if someone tells you, well, we've engineered the human out of a process, then I think then the processes immediately become limited, right? Because, even if you use artificial intelligence or you use all these kind of systems, and I think you still need the human being to be available. So, in short, I think we're a few years away from actually getting into an aircraft and allowing it to fly us from one place to another without any human intervention. So whilst we've got the human being still around, okay, and we're not taken over by machines, okay, Matt, then I think it'd be important to understand human factors.
Yeah, no, and I think you captured that really well at the beginning of your presentation, really, around, the human factors element of process safety needs to be better understood, better applied, and more involved. And I was really taken with the bit you said about collaboration as well. One of your slides there was talking about the importance of collaboration. And I remember back to when I was a young lad, wasn't that long ago, it was a long time ago, when I was a process operator working in the high hazard industry, chemical industry, top tier coma site. And we used to develop our own safe systems of work for operating the plant. There was very little involvement of the chemical engineers. There was very little involvement of anybody other than the process, the process operators. And actually just thinking about how much better those procedures would have been with that collaborative approach, and some of the things that we did could maybe have been considered better, opportunities for improvement, identified sooner. Are you finding that collaboration is improving within the industry? Is that your
I think so. Yeah. I think the collaboration is improving really for 3 or 4 reasons. One of them, at least in oil and gas, that collaboration is very good, I think, in the aviation sector, definitely in the nuclear sector. I think in the reason why the collaboration, I think, is improving is, well, one of them is because of the advent of the internet, obviously, and the communication, the ability to sort of communicate online and connect with people online as well. So you get expertise from different parts of the world being able to all join one meeting and actually work together. The second reason, I think the industry has generally understood and started to appreciate that, collaborating on issues like process safety management and safety and health and safety and risk management in general is a win-win situation for everyone. I mean, people don't compete with each other and say, well, I'm going to be better than, this company A than better than B by having less incidents. So because we've learned something, I'm not going to teach the other organization, or I'm not going to share my lessons learned with another organization so I can be more competitive or more. You really have to be, quite psychotic to think that way. And organizations are not psychotic, thank God, So there's greater appreciation to collaboration and learning. Third reason is because there's a lot of institutions, such as, the Energy Institute, is a good example, the IChemE. So these institutions have brought a lot of people around together. And the same thing with NEBOSH and I guess other organizations, IRSM, which bring a lot of practitioners together. So they ended up, sharing more expertise, both at individual level and at an organizational kind of level. And it's more encouraged. So today, when we're developing standards for like the IP standards, NFPA standards, whatever, ANSI standards, whatever, the process in order to make those standards is inherently designed to be collaborative and experiential as well. So we bring people not only with the knowledge and the academic qualifications, but people with good experience. So that all of that, and obviously we've had a lot of incidents. These incidents have been investigated. So this in itself is also collaboration. So yeah, in the last 20, 30 years, I can see amazing improvements in collaboration, which is good news. Yeah.
Well, Waddah, thanks for, I nearly said some really cheesy line there about thanks for collaborating with us today, but I won't say that. I just did. But that was appalling, wasn't it? Sorry about that. Dr. Waddah, I always enjoy spending time with you. And I know how busy you are. I know how much you just come back from some traveling. I think you mentioned to me before today. So thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody's really benefited from your input. Once again, take a look at some of the books that Dr. Waddah and his colleagues have written as well, and look up the information out there on the connected leadership. I think we're going to supply some links as well for you to be able to click on and follow that. But thanks ever so much for your time today, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yes, likewise. Thanks a lot, Matt. And once again, thanks to NEBOSH for having us on this online conference. All the best to everybody who's listened in, and and I'll be happy if anyone wants to reach out. Then they can always get to me on the email which is attached. But I'll please do share the links with everyone. And thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be in the company and to collaborate with NEBOSH. All right. Thank you very much. God bless.